Some of the views expressed on the Mormon Channel are solely for the education and inspiration of our audience and may not represent the official position of the Church.
I'm Nathan Wright, and you're listening to the Mormon Channel of The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For one who had little schooling, Joseph Smith left an unusually extensive literary record. From 1828, when he began work on the Book of Mormon at age 22, to 1844, when he was killed at age 38, the prophet Joseph produced thousands of pages of revelations, translations, correspondence, declarations, discourses, journals, and histories. This vast literary legacy has initiated what is called the Joseph Smith Papers Project. And although we have previously discussed a few of the specific publications on this program, today we'll be talking about the overall project. And here to help with that are historians Ron Esplin, Dean Jesse, and Eric Smith. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Before we begin with the subject at hand, we'd like to know a little bit more about each of you. I expect probably your histories may somehow coincide with the Joseph Smith Papers Project, but let's start with Ron.
I worked with Dean Jesse on the documents of Latter-day Saint history in the 1970s. I worked on Brigham Young, he worked on Joseph Smith. And later, as we had a chance to develop a comprehensive project on Joseph Smith, he and I worked together, and I became the managing editor of the Joseph Smith Papers, where I still serve.
Excellent. Brother Jesse.
I started working in the church historian's office in 1964. That's when President Joseph Fielding Smith was the church historian. And at that time, they were just starting the cataloging of the manuscript material, which is the handwritten material, basically. I worked there for about 8 years, and then when Leonard Arrington was appointed church historian in 1972, I switched over to the history division and worked there with him. Continued there till 1980 when they transferred the history division to BYU, became the Joseph Fielding Smith Institute for Church History. Continued there till 2005, I guess is when we moved here to Salt Lake again. So we've been at it for a few years.
Very good.
Finally, we can get it right this time.
And Eric Smith.
I started working as an editor for the curriculum department in the year 2000. And in the year 2006, I had developed some expertise, I guess you would say, with editing materials related to Joseph Smith. And my boss got in touch with Ron Esplin and asked if they could use some help with editing. And Ron said yes, and I later realized this was Ron's habit of getting as much help as possible to help with the project. And I've been working for the project for 6 years now, and I'm what's called the production manager. I oversee the editors and the people doing the typesetting and the indexing and the other production work on the project.
Very good. So let's talk specifically about the history of the Joseph Smith Project. As I mentioned, your lives or your history with the church pretty much began the Joseph Smith Project. So
let me say one word about the long-time background to this project. Joseph Smith himself had cared about gathering documents and appointed many folks to help him in that endeavor. And some of the work we have published is the direct result of the things that he and his cadre of clerks and historians put together. So we're following in a legacy that really goes back to late Missouri, early Nauvoo, and building on that because they preserve documents that we presently have control of, and building on that because as Latter-day Saints we've always cared about our history. So this is an opportunity to do for our day what they worked hard to do for their day, and Dean has been a part of laying the foundation in the modern era for doing that same work. Before we talk about the project and what we're trying to do today, there are a couple of items of background that will help folks understand why we care so much about it and why maybe they should care about it.
Great.
One is, even though Latter-day Saints have always been known as a history-keeping people, we have today another tradition that kind of feeds into our own passion for understanding our roots and our own heritage. And that is a professional effort of documentary editing that the United States historians and documentary editors initiated it right after World War II. This began with Julian Boyd in 1943. Didn't get his first volume published until 10 years later, after World War II, with the Thomas Jefferson Papers. And building on the work of Julian Boyd, other folks got their arms around the Benjamin Franklin Papers and the George Washington Papers and developed a tradition of scholarly documentary editing, which developed standards of professionalism and historical research and editing that we follow. So we take our Latter-day Saint interest in history and merge it with the scholarly tradition that is developed for documentary editing in the United States, and are presenting the papers of Joseph Smith in the same kinds of formats and with the same careful scholarship around them that we have for the Founding Fathers, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington, as just three examples. And we've not only followed their model, we've been able to consult with many of the folks that have done those. And we have learned from them and learned together. And so we have great confidence that the work we're doing is work of a high caliber that other scholars can use and that meets the same standards as other documentary editing editions.
Maybe you can explain to me the difference between what a documentary history is and what the Joseph Smith Papers Project is.
So a documentary history would gather up every surviving document about a person. And therefore, if somebody observed Joseph Smith and wrote their own account of their impressions of him, that would be part of a documentary history. Documentary editing, the papers projects like the Joseph Smith Papers, has a little bit more narrow focus. It's what Joseph Smith himself produced or was done under his direct control on the one hand, or things that were in his office and kept by him. Letters that come to him. He didn't write, of course, but they're part of his papers because he had them by ownership. So our purview is not everything ever written about Joseph Smith at the time, but it's everything that he produced himself that survives, and the things that he kept in his office that help us understand his role and mission as both a Latter-day Saint leader and as an individual. And in either case, one of the things that we all have a passion about is the power of the documents. The documents are tangible connections to a past that otherwise is pretty slippery. But when you have in front of your eyes, and the readers of the Joseph Smith Papers in print or on the website can look at these documents and say, that was actually created by a person on a particular date in a particular place. And this living artifact has a connection to the stories that matter to us and to the history that helps us understand who we are.
How does a person who is maybe not within the church, historian of other backgrounds, how are they going to know for sure that everything is on the up and up, shall we say, of this project?
Great question. The National Archives has established what's called the NHPRC, the National Historical Records and Publications Commission, which helps fund, on the one hand, and helps establish standards for, on the other hand, these kinds of projects. Now, we didn't need funding because we have a private donor that's helped us a great deal, which we may talk about in a moment. But we did go through their process as if we were soliciting funds from this government commission in order to be certified by them that we are following the top scholarly standards. We also have outside reviewers. 3 out of the 4 people on our National Advisory Board are either in the field of documentary editing or national scholars in religious and documentary editing history. And they read all our material and give us invaluable feedback.
So it sounds like the church is remaining in control of the project, but is very open with it.
It's published by Church Historians Press, which is an imprint of the Church History Department, but the commission that we've been given is to do this so that it's credible.
Very good.
To do it right, to tell the story so that we could all learn from the documents. And there's no particular spin other than trying to understand the setting and the message of the documents themselves.
And we're making available images of all of Joseph Smith's papers, so people can come to our website and look at the image themselves. So if they don't know that they can trust the way that we transcribe the document, they can look at the image themselves and make their own transcription if they feel like doing that.
I did spend a little bit of time online looking at just a few of the things, and the clarity and the ease of the site was really quite amazing to me.
The website does allow access, a very personal connection to these documents so that you can see them in great detail. And eventually, as we present the historical research around them, you'll be able to understand their setting online as well as in print.
So you mentioned there was a donor to help make this project happen. Can we talk about that?
Latter-day Saints have cared about their history for 175 years, and yet we have never had a comprehensive effort to get our arms around the foundational documents. And part of that is that maybe we didn't have enough trained editors and scholars in an earlier age, but part of it clearly is a matter of resources. How do you bring together funding to actually have a cadre of folks working together, historians and archivists and document specialists and editors, so that we can learn from each other and bring very rich perspectives to these documents? That's only been possible because we began with institutional support and then had that enriched by Larry H. Miller and Gail Miller in the Miller family. I think the Millers alone could not have done this because we needed to have access to the document, and we needed the church historian's imprint. We needed the church's blessings in order to have the wherewithal to do all this. But the church couldn't have done it alone because it's a massive undertaking to gather all the documents and present them in a couple of dozen volumes and a website that will grow every 2 or 3 months by hundreds of documents. So partly this is possible because Larry Miller caught the vision of the power of the documents. And when he saw a little show and tell of these actual documents, he could not get them out of his mind. And an interesting story how he came to realize that there was something he had to do about these documents, not just think about them or enjoy them.
Right.
And he came to see those that internal drive to help this work in terms of, I've got to help with Dean Jesse's work. And that's how he got connected to the Joseph Smith Papers. And because of the generosity of the Millers, even though Brother Miller himself passed away 3 years ago, they continue to provide an invaluable foundation for the resources to bring enough people together to really get our arms around our documentary heritage for the first time.
Very good. This is Legacy on the Mormon Channel. We're talking with historians Dean Jesse, Eric Smith, and Ron Esplin today about the Joseph Smith Papers project. I'm Nathan Wright. Tell me about the physical documents that comprise the project. Who owns them and where are they?
Well, one of the reasons we're doing this is that there are documents scattered all over the country. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints owns most of the documents, and most of them are located at the Church History Library here in Salt Lake City. But the Community of Christ in Independence, Missouri has a significant number of documents, including the printer's manuscript of the Book of Mormon, which is one of the great treasures of any archive anywhere. There are some documents at the Chicago Historical Society, some at Yale, some at Brigham Young University, some at Huntington Library in Southern California, and all over the country. So one of the conveniences we are offering is we have sent people out over the many decades to gather these documents, get images of them, transcribe them, and we're going to publish them in one place on our website and in our print volumes. So a church member or a scholar who wants to read these documents himself or herself, rather than having to go to a library to do the research, can come to one place, either our website or our print volumes, and access these documents. As far as the artifacts themselves, I think Dean can probably speak to that because he, for many years, was assigned to work right next to the documents in the cage at the old church historian's office.
By the cage, Brother Jesse, what does that actually mean? That sounds a little confining.
In the historian's office back in the 1960s, the manuscript material was separated from the rest of the library material by what we called the cage. It was a section of the library that was enclosed in heavy gauge steel mesh type material, and it formed a wall with a door with the same material, and it could be locked, and that's where we did our work. So the cataloging of that manuscript material was getting underway right at that time, and so we started doing that, and it's been a very time-consuming, and it's something that requires a lot of attention to detail to make accurate transcriptions and copy the material in a way that we preserve what's on the written page. The hope is that if over time, if the originals deteriorate or destroyed, you'll be able to take the printed version and show exactly what the handwritten version looks like. And it could be recreated because of the detail in which the transcription is made.
When Dean was assigned to work in the cage, it was kind of like Brer Rabbit being put into the briar patch. They thought they were doing him a disservice, but it was exactly where he wanted to be and the materials he wanted to be working with.
That's great.
In fact, his being hired required a couple of interviews with Joseph Fielding Smith, who was church historian. And the first time President Smith basically said, "We don't have need for anybody, and good day, young man." The second time he said, "Well, I guess maybe we do have a need, but there's no place to put you. There's just no room." And finally the staff said, "Dean, Elder Smith has authorized you to come to work. You're going to have to work in the cage. It's the only place we got any space."
Oh, darn, he said. So tell me, there's got to be some categories of the Joseph Smith papers, and we're going to be talking about in another show histories, and so I know that that's a category. What are some of the categories of these books?
When you have a mass of material, it's important to organize it so it can be understandable. And the Joseph Smith papers have been divided into 6 series. The Revelations and Translation material is one of those series. The Journal of Joseph Smith, there's about 10, 12 journals of his. That'll be another series. The Documents is another series. The administrative material, Joseph Smith was there when the Relief Society was first founded, for example, and he was also involved in other organizations in the church, and the minutes of those were kept under his direction, and these would be included in the administrative series. The legal series, there's some more than 200 occasions when he was engaged in legal activity, either as plaintiff, defendant, or witness in a legal case. And those are all being addressed in the legal and business series. And finally, there's the history series, which will be a publication of the original manuscript of the history of the church. And that series of 6 large volumes of handwritten material is being transcribed and is being made available, most of it on the web. But that'll be the 6 series.
Thank you. Now, this isn't just taking pictures of original documents and printing them in a book. As I understand it, there's some pretty serious annotation going on. Can you explain to our listeners what that actually means?
Eric mentioned that one of the services we provide is gathering these materials from the far-flung corners, and that means that any given scholar does not have to travel all over the country to have access to the core materials. Another service is simply to transcribe them. Many of these handwritten manuscripts are difficult to read. Some are faded, some are damaged. Providing very professional, highly verified transcripts is a great service and allows historians to go through materials quickly, find the materials they need, and have something they have confidence in that they can use in their work. The third thing that we provide is the annotation around the documents. We probably annotate more than many of the other projects, although we don't have anything like Julian Boyd's 70-page footnote in one Thomas Jefferson publication. But we do find that non-Latter-day Saint scholars don't have any background in Mormon studies for the most part, And Latter-day Saint readers don't have any background in the details of the history, and so we provide some context for both audiences. Every document gets some careful scrutiny as to its setting, so we can help explain when it was created, where it was created, why it was created, how it was received at the time. And then in reading the document, we try to provide enough information that a modern reader can understand it the way a 19th century reader might have at the moment he or she received it. And that requires explaining some fairly arcane conventions of language or references of time and place. And so there's a fair amount of annotation and a great deal of research that goes into these books.
Excellent. So I have on my desk one of the recent publications, and understand it's like $55 to buy it. And I can't expect that the normal Latter-day Saint is going to go out and buy this entire series of books. So is there a relationship between the books and something a little more accessible?
Yes, in fact. The books are a subset of Joseph Smith's papers. Right now we have published 5 books in print. We have 2 volumes of the Journal series, 1 volume of the History series, and 2 volumes of the Revelations and Translations series. And we have another volume of the History series coming out this fall, so that will make 6 books. And eventually we'll have about 20 volumes in print. There will be another volume of journals. There will be another volume of Revelations and Translations. There'll be 1 or 2 legal and business records volumes, and then there'll be a number of documents volumes that we'll start publishing next year. The royalty that we get at the Joseph Smith Papers for those books goes back into the project. So if people do feel comfortable buying those books, it does allow us to continue our work. But as you mentioned, we have a website, and the website is comprehensive. So whereas in the books you'll be able to get perhaps 2/3 of Joseph Smith's papers, the website will offer 100% of his papers. And the website is free now, and it will always be free. So ultimately, the website will be the legacy of our project for many decades in the future. The website will be updated and added to if additional documents are found. And so for the time being, people that want to use our materials would need to use both the books, which they don't have to buy, they could access at a library, and the website. But ultimately, 100% of what's in the books will be on the website.
So let me add one comment about the relationship between the books and the website in addition to what Eric said. We are publishing on the website ahead of publication in print many documents, but it's mainly the documents themselves with what we call a second-level transcript. It's not our final, but it's a quality transcript that we have confidence in. So folks can access the documents in many cases some years ahead of when they'll be published in print. After they're published in print, they'll have all of the annotation we just talked about and the historical introductions. And a year or so after the print edition appears, that print information will then go onto the website. So documents are available on the website early, before publication in print, and later, a year or 2 after publication in print with all their full treatment.
And there's some really neat things we're able to do on the website that aren't possible in print. For example, we have put hypertext links on the names of people, the names of places, difficult terms. So if you're on the website and you're reading a document and you come to a name, say you're an outside scholar and you come to the name Frederick G. Williams and you don't know who he is, you can just click on his name and biographical information for him will appear. Now in the print volume, that information is at the back of the book, so it's accessible. But on the website, all this kind of information is just one click away. You can also go straight to Frederick G. Williams' biographical entry on the website, and it will give you a list of Joseph Smith's papers where his name appears. So if you were trying to write an article about him or doing family history research on him or some other study, you would, at your fingertips, have a list of all the places that you would want to start looking for information.
This is all very exciting and scholarly, I might say. And so maybe to bring it back down to the regular person who may not be as into church history as maybe they should be or could be, what's the value in the Joseph Smith Project?
The value to Latter-day Saints will be that the folks who write Latter-day Saint curriculum, the folks who write books of history and even historical fiction will have access to all these materials and be preparing other kinds of documents based on the research that is presented in the Joseph Smith papers that will be more easily done and will be better than they could have been otherwise. And there is the fact that educated Latter-day Saints, college students, lots of folks who care about the history and want to access it directly will read these volumes and find them very informative. They're research volumes. It's not a narrative for the most part, but there's wonderful information that's rewarding if you spend a little time with them. Elder Jensen, the church historian, loved telling the story after our first volume was published of going to a stake conference where a stake president asked him to accompany him to visit a couple of shut-ins that couldn't come to conference. One of them was an 87-year-old widow who was in a rocking chair cradling her Joseph Smith Journals book, and she had just finished reading it.
Wow.
And told Elder Jensen how grateful she was to find in there the humanness of Joseph Smith and his brother William, who had a feud that was going on in 1835, and left her feeling maybe there's a chance for her, because even the prophet's brother and the prophet disagreed on occasion, and the Lord was patient with them. My father-in-law, who was in his 80s, read both the published volumes and some other volumes in manuscript copy and loved all of it, and he was not an educated man. So I think that Latter-day Saints generally can benefit from them. The church overall will benefit over time by the research as this material becomes more accessible through our publications.
Excellent.
Some people say, well, I don't care anything about history. And yet, the history we carry around in our heads is the history that motivates us. And the more we know about someone, the more we can become sold on what they're doing, and it motivates us to accomplish more in our own lives. And I think the more we know about Joseph Smith, for example, it motivates us in our activity in the church or wherever. It strengthens us. It gives us that dimension that we wouldn't have if we don't have it. And I think that's one of the problems we have in our country today, is that we people have not taken seriously the past. They don't understand the principles and the foundation upon which we rest here. And if we did, the more we understood it, we would be more united. We'd be more willing to be involved in for furthering this work.
Thank you.
David McCullough, a great popularizer of history for the American Revolutionary era and other works he's done, makes the point that being an American is only one generation deep. And if we don't teach our children, our grandchildren, what it means to be an American, we lose that. The Latter-day Saint experiment or experience is also one generation deep in the same sense, that if we don't have ways to connect to the past, to understand the past, then whatever is distinctive about being a Latter-day Saint gets lost. Part of our heritage does inform who we are, and to the degree we don't understand that, we won't understand how we became what we sometimes like to say as a peculiar people, and we won't be able to keep whatever is good in that peculiarity. To the degree we understand our history and make connections with it and are motivated by it, we can be a stronger people.
Thank you. We've been discussing the Joseph Smith Papers Project with Eric Smith, Ron Esplin, and Dean Jesse, all historians, and we appreciate your individual and collaborative efforts in this amazing work and look forward to more of the publications. Thanks for being with us on Legacy today. This is the Mormon Channel, a media outlet of The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Nathan Wright.